Okay. All right, 6:30. I'd like to start the Administrative Services Committee meeting for Tuesday, September 5th, 2017. Please call the roll.
Counselor Corradino.
Here.
Counselor Van Buren.
Here.
Counselor Reynolds.
Here.
Counselor Walker. Counselor Emmons.
Here.
I'd like a motion to approve the minutes of August 21st, 2017.
Make a motion.
Second.
Counselor Corradino.
Yes.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Reynolds.
Yes.
Counselor Walker. Yes. Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Is there any old business to attend tonight? Seeing none, moving right on to new business under authorization. Item number 1, the engineer's office requests approval for the low bid received for the Eastside Wastewater Treatment Plant roof project that was submitted by WCA Roofing in the amount of $174,000. Anybody here to talk about that? Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, this roof project was necessary because they were all leaking, and one of the projects in the wastewater plant just installed in the neighborhood of $700,000 worth of new equipment. So we got a good price on it. We had 5 or 6 bids, and this was low bid, and I think you should go with it.
Okay. Just for the sake of everybody here, I'll just read off. There were 5 bids. WCA Roofing came in lowest at $174,000, and then there was one at $216,160, another one at $217,700, $269,000, and $274,000. So WCA Roofing was the low bidder by a considerable amount. Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, can I have a motion?
Second.
Counselor Corradino.
Yes.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Reynolds.
Yes.
Counselor Walker. Yes. Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 2, the engineer's office requests approval for change order number 6 for the general contract with Marcellus Construction Company, Incorporated, for the combined sewer separation, second 25% project in the amount of $0 for additional work for unforeseen conditions. Mr. Johnson, would you like to expand on this a little bit?
Yeah, these are change orders due to miscellaneous work needed to be done. We had conflict with gas line. We had broke an unmarked water main and another service. So the work had to be completed in order to fulfill the contract.
All right, thank you. I think everybody here on the council knows during the course of the work of consent decree, there seems to be all kinds of undiscovered, or I should say, surprises once you break open the road. So this is not a surprise to us, I guess.
Correct.
All right, thank you. Any comments, questions?
Second.
Counselor Corradino.
Yes.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Reynolds.
Yes.
Counselor Walker. Yes. Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Item number 3, Councilor Nathan Emmons requests consideration from the Common Council to approve a property disposition policy and procedure for the city-owned real estate. Councilor Emmons?
Thank you, Council. Let me kind of frame this a little bit, and I'm going to turn it over to Councilor Caracoli to kind of walk us through some of the details of it. Currently, the Oswego County is going through legislation. I think they're going to be voting on it next week to change their timeline in which when property can move from being in this kind of limbo of unpaid taxes to foreclosure. And the current timeline for the county is a 4-year timeline, meaning that residents who own residential property have 4 years of time in which to pay back taxes that are owed on their property. The county currently is proposing to move that to a 2-year process, meaning that you only have 2 years to kind of make up your taxes before a residential piece of property moves into the foreclosure process. For the county, that would mean the county assuming that property and then moving that property back onto the market for sale. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I think when a property is in that sort of tax limbo, it's the rest of the taxpayers that have to pick up the tab for those back taxes. Well, here in the city, we have a similar process, except ours is a 3-year process, not necessarily a 4-year process. But the same holds true. When a property owner is delinquent on their taxes, the rest of the tax taxpayers have to make up for those property taxes, specifically in the school district side of things. The city of Oswego cuts a check to the school district every year for unpaid school taxes. That is money that we have to account for in our budget, and currently we have somewhere around $2.5 million worth of outstanding taxes in total within the city of Oswego. So when you think about when we have to put a budget together and we are anticipating already a $2.5 million shortfall in revenue, we have to kind of make up for that within our budget, and that can be tax increases, it can mean budget cuts, so on and so forth. So what I'm proposing, and I'll let Councilor Caracoli take this on in terms of some of the specific, but is to really mirror what the county is doing and moving us from a 3-year process to a 2-year process. The commercial property side of things, we're already at 2 years in terms of being able to move to a foreclosure process. I'd like to align us to a 2-year process for residential property owners. Councilor Caracoli, can you walk us through in terms of the policy itself?
Sure. Thank you. Through the chair, and to expand on Councilor Emmons' comments, the New York State real property tax law gives communities 4 years now. So you have, any property owner has 4 years to make up their taxes before it falls into a foreclosure process. But the law also allows local communities and taxing jurisdictions the option of reducing that, but it has to be done, through legislation, public hearings, and all the rest of it. That's not exactly what we're here for tonight, although just to editorialize a little bit, I certainly support what the county's doing, and we look forward to receiving their local law, reviewing it, and seeing how we might be able to incorporate it and bring it back here at a future date. This is the I guess the cart before the horse, but it's an important part of the process. Right now, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, when the city receives foreclosed properties, there's a process that we've utilized for a number of years to dispose of that property. And what I'm proposing through Councilor Emmons, we've talked about this, and we are receiving a number of properties. Last year alone, I believe we received 16 foreclosed properties. This year, we're on pace to receive somewhere between 8 and over 10, both commercial and residential properties. There's a lot coming into our portfolio, so to speak, and it makes no sense for the city to hold on to it. It's tax exempt. We want to get it back into private ownership and make it taxable. So the current process contemplates a foreclosed property, but as we've noticed, particularly in the last years, we've stepped up our code enforcement and other avenues that we're receiving properties either by default, abandonment, code violations. They're turned over to us. Their back taxes are clearly still the number one reason and way we get these properties. But it's not just foreclosed properties. So the changes, although modest, incorporate and encompass any property that we receive, whether it's by gift, and we actually have had proposals that way, by foreclosure or any other way. When we have this property, then there's a process that we're trying to refine to dispose of these properties. I am getting calls regularly from property owners, neighbors of properties that the city has taken over, seeking, to buy them. And unfortunately, the law doesn't allow you just to reach out to the neighbor, although that would probably be the best, and you could make the argument that's the best purchaser of a property like that. In fairness to the process, and because of who we are, we have to open it up to a process that everyone can participate in. Whether they choose to or not is their decision. So this process does provide some flexibility in that regard to allow for a bidding process. It could be either done by public auction or sealed bids. Gone are the days of knowing your alderman, councilor, and just putting a deal together that never sees the light of day until the deed is filed in the county clerk's office. So we've moved beyond that. But this process just simply streamlines what we have been doing. I mean, from a just procedural, it reduces the process from 3 pages to 2 pages, from 19 steps to 15 steps. But essentially, when we get this property, we either have the option of putting it in the hands of a realtor or selling it ourselves. And again, I'm not undercutting the realtors in this community. They do a fine job, but you know, when you can sell the property, when people are coming to you as the owner and wanting that property, I'm not sure that it makes any sense to give up, you know, 5 or 6% of commission when we could do it on our own. So that's the process in a nutshell. I mean, if there are, presumably you've all reviewed it, and I'm happy to answer any questions. But much of what we do now still remains. We get the property, we check it out, we make sure that it's vacant and secured. We send the DPW commissioner, the police if they have to verify it. If somebody's in there, then we bring an eviction proceeding to make sure that we've got it secured. So we don't want to have liability hanging out there. And then it's a matter of putting it up for either for sale by way of a public auction or sealed bids or whatever the option might be. Unfortunately, like I said, I'm getting calls in my capacity as city attorney saying, hey, I'm the next door neighbor. I'd like to buy that property. And in fact, I'm willing to pay you X for it right now. And I said, that's great. Unfortunately, we can't do it that way. But hold on, we're going to address the process and see if we can't make it work for you. But unfortunately, you're going to be competing with others, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Any questions? Like you said, we're putting cards for the horse. You think we should wait to look into this next to the county? That's a great question, but I would say no, and for this reason, because we already have a process. We already have the 4-year process, or the 3-year process rather, and 2 years for commercial. What the county's doing is just looking to reduce that to 2 years. But we already have the process. So we have an inventory of properties. I'm not sure, if I had to guess, we have well over 20, probably 30 properties that are city-owned that could be turned over to others. And they, whether they're vacant lots that could be split by neighbors and make bigger yard, or somebody needs off-street parking, or full houses that could be rehabilitated. So there's lots of properties out there, and I wouldn't necessarily, I don't think we have to wait because we have an inventory now. Certainly, we're going to want to make sure we've got a process down if we do streamline it, because we're going to have even more properties to get rid of.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilor. Yes, I would say we don't have to wait. Whether it's 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, whatever it is, the process is the process. And I think the bottom line is, as we have been talking, we want to get properties out of this kind of limbo phase and back on the tax roll, bottom line. If we have people that are interested in purchasing these properties, and it's that fair market value, let's get it to them as quickly as we can, so the rest of us don't have to continue to pick up the slack on this property. I am obviously advocating for us to move to that 2-year process, and we'll move that, our timeline, we'll move that forward, certainly as the county kind of does that on their side too. But this particular policy, since it's a policy, it doesn't require us to kind of move through a whole bunch of legal stuff. We can amend the policy and just get this moving forward. So as we have these properties, and we have quite a few right now, we can get these properties turned over to private hands and get them back on the rolls again.
Thank you. Any other questions for the counselor? Questions from anybody else? Oh, I'm sorry.
I had one. So when we were talking about streamlining the process, and I think Councilor Caracoli kind of touched on it before, saying, we would make these deals where, you wouldn't know they happened until they were filed in the clerk's office. If I'm reading 7 right on the proposed, isn't that opening this up to allow that to happen again, as you can now directly solicit from the buyer or through a realtor and it doesn't go through the listing process that we set forward. I'm not trying to, say that we're doing it, but it seems like we're amending that policy to skirt what we just talked about, working to abolish. It kind of sounds like we're going back to that, if I'm reading 7 right.
So maybe Counselor Caracoli can expand on item number 7?
Sure, and I think, I'm certainly open to suggestions, but the way that that I interpret that is there's essentially 2 processes. There's, bidding or auction, and then through direct solicitation from a buyer, whether using services of a licensed realtor or not. I still think even that direct solicitation needs to be offered to the greater public, if you will. So whether that is we have an offer, and maybe we call it it's not even a right of first refusal. This is an offer. Is there anybody else that wishes to make an offer on this property? You have until a certain deadline. So, but I get your point, Counselor, and it certainly wasn't intended to go back to a day when you're.
Certainly, I'm not pointing any fingers.
No, but
reading that's how it reads. Like
we can tighten that up a little bit to make sure direct solicitation, but in any event, there has to be either a bidding process or an auction. You can't just come in and say, I want to buy this property for $10,000 to the exclusion of anybody else that may have an interest in it.
Yeah, I think the or is just what makes it ambiguous, because it kind of gives you the option,
Yeah.
To go and do just that.
Right.
If somebody comes with a nice enough proposal, it can fly its way through council, and nobody'd really bat an eye, and all of a sudden it's at the clerk's office and it's done.
Yeah.
So that would just be my main concern, was tightening up 7, because I feel like you probably want a little more transparency or, some control over that aspect.
Do we have a recommendation? You want to change a word?
I can certainly come up with some, but I think Councilor Caracoli's kind of got my point.
Yep,
If he wants
absolutely.
to put his own legalese to it, he can, but if you'd like me to, I have no problem typing up a sentence.
One other point I guess I would make, and that is, excuse me, at some point, we may even want to consider, if we don't have it already, and I don't recall that we do, but actually listing all of those properties on a website and with a suggested price that we would be willing to sell it for, right? And then essentially, it's an open listing at that point. And I think that's the point.
Yeah.
If it's listed on the MLS, it's out there. Anybody can see it
Sure.
and bid on it.
I actually think Fitzgibbons does it right now, and I don't know if it's still in operation. I haven't checked, but they were doing OswegoHomes.com, and they were correlating the houses that they had for sale through the city with ORA target zones, and listing also the incentives that you get through that, because Pathfinder's willing to give people special financing to buy ORA-based homes, letting you know what options you had available for ORA grants if you're in the target zone. So that may already be happening through the Fitzgibbons website, and we could certainly try and tie into that harder, see if we can list that on the city website, if it's still in operation. I'm not sure. I haven't checked since we started the process. I know John does a nice job of giving us, a fair amount of information on the listings and their appraisals and stuff. But, I'm certainly not opposed to something like that. But I think some of those things may be, in there or happening with the realtor. You want to investigate a little bit. Tie in. So I think that's happening. I think it's OswegoHomes.com, but don't quote me. I've been there in a while.
At this point, as far as regardless of the wording change, I mean, how do you want to proceed? Do you want to make a proposal or a amendment to this at this point, or do you want to just pass it as is?
I think if you guys want to go through and Councilor Caracoli wants to put the amendment in for when we get to the floor, that's fine. Like you said, there's no public hearing, so this doesn't have to be in its final form, 2 weeks before the night of the meeting. I mean, I can certainly, allow that. I mean, that's
Yeah, I can
not
circulate.
looking to stop anything. I think a simple sentence or two just to tighten that up would still shift it right into where you want it. But,
I'm sure you can come up with some wording that we'll all agree on.
All right.
Item number 7.
Very good.
All right,
Thank you.
do I have a
Make a motion.
motion?
second.
Counselor Corradino.
Yes.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Reynolds.
Yes.
Counselor Walker. Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
All right, moving on to item number 4. Deborah Coates, City Chamberlain, requests a budget amendment to the sewer fund line item G 9950.0900, transfer to capital projects in the amount of $148,439 as reimbursement to P1663 for the purchase of the excavator. Mrs. Code, did you want to share with us anything on this?
Thank you, Chairman. This is just to reassign the account that's charged from capital to the sewer fund.
Okay, any questions from the council on this? Seems pretty cut and dry. Can I have a motion?
Second.
Counselor Corradino.
Yes.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Reynolds.
Yes.
Counselor Walker.
Yes.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Item number 5. Thomas Kells, DPW Commissioner, requests a blanket authorization to hold auctions through Auctions Unlimited anytime it is deemed necessary without the requirement of council approval for each listing. A list of items going to auction will be supplied to the council for each auction. Commissioner Kells, would you like to share anything with us on this?
Counselors, this is something we do every year. It's just what it says, to get rid of old furniture, old vehicles, old counselors, so on and so forth.
Excuse me? I am one of the old councilors. Any questions for Commissioner Kells? Yes, Councilor Walker.
I'd just like to make a comment. I think it's a good idea to come forth every year with it.
Councilor McLaughlin.
Yeah, the one thing I would suggest is maybe adding the word before each auction instead of the day of the auction we get the list or something. Getting a list prior to the auction.
Prior to the actual auction date. That's something that you can do?
We can do that.
Then sounds like it's doable. Any other comments or changes or questions on this? Seeing none, can I have a motion?
Second.
Counselor Corradino.
Yes.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Reynolds.
Yes.
Counselor Walker. Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Item number 6. The wastewater department is requesting permission for Timothy Woodward to travel from October 22nd through the 27th, 2017. This is for the Grade 3 Supervision and Technical Operations course at SUNY Morrisville Environmental Training Center. This is the second of 4 courses needed to acquire his operator training license. Anybody here to speak to this, any chance? Seems pretty cut and dry. We need to have trained operators. Any comments from the council? And it's mandatory besides, so can I have a motion?
Second.
Counselor Corradino.
Yes.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Reynolds.
Yes.
Counselor Walker. Yes. Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Item number 7. Carolyn Anderson, Animal Control Officer, requests a budget amendment to the 2017 Animal Control operating budget in the amount of $15,000 to account A.3510.102, Personal Services Overtime. Carolyn?
Thank you, Counselor. As I did email the counselors, as I stated in my email, it's been an extremely busy summer. Just in the month of August, we had 47 after-hours emergencies that we had to respond to, and it's just, we've been running nonstop. This is actually the first day I've gotten home since, like, before dinner for the past 3 months, so it's just staff staying and helping me and helping respond to calls and things like that, so.
Questions, Caroline? I just have one quick question. I mean, do you foresee this being the last request in 2017?
Yes.
And traditionally, the overtime throughout the year, it's probably the busiest during the summer,
Correct.
so things should calm down a little bit.
I'm hoping so.
And didn't we just recently provide you with about $8,000 for additional funds for trapping?
Yes. And that is handling the nuisance trapping for those skunks. This is simply, our overtime money is pretty much gone just to emergency complaints. The nuisance trapping is a scheduled certain number of houses per week that we can get to trap the skunks. But Sean's been very busy.
Any other comments? Yes, Councilor.
Where would the funding come from? What budget? General fund?
questions or comments? Seeing none, can I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Second.
Counselor Corodino?
Yes.
Counselor Van Buren?
Yes.
Counselor Reynolds?
Yes.
Counselor Walker?
Yes.
Counselor Emmons?
Yes.
And we need a resolution.
Need a resolution, Carolyn? Thank you. Item number 8, Randall Griffin, Fire Chief, is requesting several intra-departmental transfers to cover the overtime expenses due to long-term injuries and vacant officer positions. Chief Griffin is not here, but I see somebody else is.
Chief Griffin can't be here. I'm Deputy Chief Norfleet in his place. We're just requesting intradepartmental transfer for the ongoing overtime expenses from the vacancies in the officer corps that should be filled with the return of the civil service exam and personnel interviews for the lower ranking officers.
Same question for you. Is this something that you and Chief Griffin think will take you to the end of the year?
I
You had a
can't.
crystal ball?
I can't speak to the timeline for the promotion of the lower rank officers to fill the vacant positions, but I believe that this should take us well through the fall.
Questions, Chief? Seeing none, can I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Second.
Counselor Corodino?
Yes.
Counselor Van Buren?
Yes.
Counselor Reynolds?
Yes.
Counselor Walker?
Yes.
Counselor Emmons?
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 9, Kevin Caracoli, City Attorney, requests consideration from the Common Council to approve an amendment to Article 13 of the Charter pertaining to the Water Department and a process for appealing charges incurred by property owners who believe they have a meritorious defense for noncompliance. A new section, C-13-11, establishes an administrative hearing process whereby a special committee of Common Council, to be known as the Audit, Finance, and Budget Committee, would be established and appointed by the mayor, would conduct a hearing based upon a written complaint filed by an aggrieved property owner. Attorney Caracoli, once again.
Nearly said it all, Mr. Chairman. This has come up recently, more recently, I guess, than not, perhaps as a result of the efforts of this council to put a little more teeth into late fees and penalties for either noncompliance, primarily with metering, water and sewer meters. That's where I think the Chamberlain's office primarily has seen this uptick. So, for whatever reason, and we'll save the reasons for another debate, I suppose, but for whatever reason, there's a late bill, there's a charge, a penalty imposed, and the property owner comes in and gives the reason why he or she shouldn't have to pay that late fee. Unfortunately, right now, the Chamberlain's office, the only answer they can give is, I'm sorry, but there's no forgiveness here. There's no process for considering your claim, what sounds like a very reasonable explanation, but there is nothing we can do here. And so the disgruntled property owner walks away and probably mostly calls you folks. So this is at least a process to consider if you're so inclined to do so. What it would do is take the pressure off of the personnel in the Chamberlain's office. They're all very good at what they do, and they can say no with the best of people. But as these examples come up, and there are some that are probably more meritorious than others, this at least gives you a way to consider those as opposed to saying, gee, I'm sorry, there's absolutely nothing we can do. This is styled very similarly after what the city of Fulton does. In fact, I reached out to their folks to determine what they do. I'm aware that they have a process, so I received it, I looked at it, compared it to what we have in our charter under the Water Department, and knowing that there is absolutely no way to grieve a late charge. Again, we're talking primarily water and sewer. This would not pertain to late taxes or any other imposition of a late fee. This is primarily for the water and sewer meters. But this sets up a process for at least considering, doesn't require you to grant the relief that's being sought, but it at least gives an avenue for doing so. And so what I'm proposing in this be, in addition to the Article 13 of the Charter, which deals with the Water Department, and it just sets up an administrative proceeding. The way that it works in Fulton, and I would, again, if it's not necessarily broke, why fix it or recreate it? There's a special committee of the Common Council. What they told me is, it doesn't get into this detail here, but the Common Council, there's at least 3 members, but any member can come and sit in, not even ex officio. You'd actually have the right to come in, participate, and vote whether to grant the relief or not. But at the very least, it would be a 3-member special committee created and appointed under the mayor's authority in the charter, and you would sit, for the term and listen to complaints. The complaints would have to be in writing and lay out their claim. They would then you would establish a date, time, and place to meet, and people that had a complaint would come in, present it to them, and then you make a decision, shortly after. Usually it's that same day, from what I'm being told from the folks in Fulton. So that's the process, the proposal. I guess it's up to you to determine whether it's a good thing or a bad thing or needs to be tweaked some more. But at least this is in response to, like I said, a rash, I would say, of complaints that we received over the last probably 2 quarters primarily, which would coincide with the action that you've taken to increase those penalties.
Thank you. Any questions for Attorney Caracoli? Councilor Walker.
I think it's a great idea. It's been long overdue. But I think we could somehow expand it out of the thing. That's great. Open it up. We have like a whole region. We've had problems in the past, like you say, we call the chamber's office, after that, they call the counselor, now they're yelling and screaming at us, and we're trying to get answers. And I think it'd be good for a grievance board.
And I think that's a point well taken. One thing I want to do a little bit more research on before I recommend opening it up to any charge, particularly taxes, real property taxes, right? So there is by law an imposition of a late fee if you don't make the payment. Now, you may have a reason why you didn't, because you didn't get your mail or whatever it might be. But the imposition of a tax and the forgiveness of a tax is a little bit different, it's actually a lot different than the forgiveness of a charge or a late fee that's imposed on a sewer or meter service. And there are opinions, I think I shared some opinions with you, and they primarily dealt with the utility services that a city or a municipality offers. I think it's a little different for real property taxes, but I'm happy to look into that. It wouldn't necessarily affect this because this is specific to the water department. If there was a provision for opening it up to the larger number of charges that we have, that would be other charter provisions that we could amend going forward. But I don't know that, it's a great question, it's worth researching, but I don't believe it disrupts, if you're inclined to go forward with this, it doesn't disrupt this now.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Don't sit down. First of all, I'd like to thank you for doing all this hard work. I think we can all agree that some of us who've only been around for about a year and 9 months have had a number of instances where people had problems with the water meter. And when you and I talked last week on this I was on board until I did a little more research. You reached out to the city of Fulton. I reached out to a couple other communities, city of Oneida, city of Watertown, and they do things a little differently there. And I think every water department probably does do things differently. I mean, our community is rather unique from the standpoint that we request the property owners to buy the water meter. I think in most of those other communities, the city supplies the water meter. But, and there's some other minor differences. But what I'm concerned about is that we're adding another layer of government, this committee that we're talking about. I mean, we've got planning, we've got zoning, we've got this committee, we've got the next committee coming up. And one of the conversations I had with one of the other cities was that when there is a problem, 99% of the problems are with the water meter itself. And in talking with the city chamberlain and also the water department here, I think before we pass something like this, I think a little more research has to be done on the way and the process that we actually go out and read the meters, how we transport and bring that data to the city hall for compiling and the data and billing it. And we need to take a look at how we collect the money. For example, one of the people who contacted me said the issue that he had could have been resolved very easily if on the water bill itself, and I don't have one with me, but on the water bill there's a little column where there's an A or an E. And in most bills that you get, there's a little legend at the bottom to tell you what A or E means. And on his bill, it had E, and he had no idea that E meant estimated. And again, an estimated bill is not an actual bill. And if somebody knew that, as this gentleman told me, he says, if I knew that it was estimated, not actual, I would have looked into it. Now, not everybody maybe would do that, but simply, and I did talk to City Chamberlain Code about this, that just making a minor tweak like that could eliminate who knows how many of the issues, 20, 30% of the billing questions or problems that we have, as well as how the information is gathered. I did talk to Commissioner Kells, and he gave me a brief rundown on how the process is taken. Lori does, I guess, most of the meter reading, and I think that some of the processes that we're doing currently can be tightened up, and eventually we could go to something like this. One of the other cities I talked to, they didn't have a committee per se. They had a water superintendent who actually overlooked and oversaw these grievances. So I'm just proposing that we take a step back and don't proceed with this, and first do our homework and do the research involved in seeing if we can change the way we're doing business in the city of Oswego on the water meter readings. So that's where I stand on this. And I asked you to stand up, and I didn't ask you a question, did I?
That's all right. You want me to answer something, I will. No, again, I don't disagree with anything you've said. I actually strongly agree that the entire water system has to be revamped because, whether you know it or not, and I'm just going to say it, we're leaving a lot of money not on the table, just it doesn't even reach the table. Just based on that E versus A. There's a lot of E's out there, and they're under E's, underestimations. And, that we can explore that a little bit further. But listen, this is a process. I think most of the complaints that at least I've heard about and fielded deal with probably one of three categories. The meter's broken, doesn't read properly, and then the property owner isn't home when Lori comes to read the meter, so she can't get in. And it is the property owner's responsibility. They buy the meter, so they have to ensure that it's working properly. But if the meter's clicking but the reader isn't, then whose problem is that? And then of course I never got my bill, or it's a two-family house and you went to the tenant and you didn't come to the owner. Those are the various arguments that I've at least heard in probably the last month or two. How many of those could be solved without the need for a committee? Well, probably a fair amount, but there has to be at least some authority given to somebody or something to do that. Because right now, unfortunately, as we pointed out, Chamberlain's office is faced with saying, I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can do. And so now you have a bunch of people walking away disgruntled. So.
Absolutely. I believe the system is maybe not totally broken, but it needs a little fix-up, maybe modernization. So what I propose to do is not to go forward on this, and that I would chair a little research committee and actually look into the operation of the city's water department and how the bills are processed. I've already talked to Mrs. Scode, and she was more than happy to have me come in when the billing's done and to look at things. And I invite any other counselor that wants to join me in this endeavor and see if we could streamline and improve the system before we actually create a committee. Any comments to that one? Councilor Walker?
Really, I think this committee is well overdue. First, well, I've been over the last 10 years, yes. The thing is, say something does happen, like, you stream on there, fix them, bills, whatever you'd like to do. For instance, how well done. Less time for that meeting. But put it there, and have the, I don't want to say like the grievance board. I said this for years. So the grievance board, every time you in there, like, get someone from here, when you start your poll.
Don't know what's
Oh, that whole toilet thing.
You know, I'd like to have something for that. Then it don't have to come to council and you got, this, they don't want this down with us here or down in the chamber. So I think that it get it going and do what you guys do.
Okay. Councilor Emmons?
Yeah, I guess I agree with Councilor Walker to a degree. I'm not sure if one really impacts the other. So, to have a grievance board or to have this committee, I think is a fairly good idea. And if we go ahead with what you're talking about in terms of fixing some of the inherent problem, that just means for this particular committee, maybe they don't have to meet as much because we fix some other problems too. But it's there if we need it in case some issues arise. So I'm not necessarily convinced that one, in terms of impacting how a bill is read or whether those sorts of things are necessarily going to mean that we don't need some sort of entity to take a look at some of the grievances that are being posed related to water bills. Just as a side note, I was one of those E's, and I'm not sure how long I was an E until I figured out that I was an E, and my last bill was an A, and I was like, what the heck's an A? Because my bill jumped up a little bit. But I didn't understand that it was part of my reader, and I had my reader replaced on the side of the building, and now it's probably makeup time in terms of the last estimated reader and now the actual read, and there's a pretty big difference between the two. So, and I do know that there's been we put some new policies in place. We put a new fee in terms of a penalty in place, which obviously encouraged me to get that little reader fixed. And you can get that little reader right upstairs on the third floor. So, yeah, I agree. There's some things that need to be fixed. There's some things that need to be worked out. But I don't think that necessarily means that this is not something that we can move forward with this evening.
Yes.
I can definitely see the benefit of doing both, having this committee go forward and also doing a little overhaul audit or whatever it would be called to the department or the process, not the department.
We have a question in the audience?
Well, I believe in a more direct approach where anybody who puts in a grievance about the bill should automatically have somebody come and calibrate the reader and then see if there's a leak as well. It's like look at some specific problems ahead of time, see if they're real, and if it's just a difference between actually the bill.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I know in one of the communities I talked to, they actually have a crew that goes out and addresses those issues and problems and takes care of them. I don't know if we really have a dedicated crew to do that. Of course, budget restraints. I see another hand up over here. Yes.
Yeah, Rantoso Area Plumbing Inspector, and I deal with this daily. We've sold hundreds of these meters in the last 2 years under the current administration. We fall through the cracks on some. Brand new meters that don't work. Readers that get damaged, or I looked at a meter today that's 35 years old. There's hundreds of them still out there. So there's going to be circumstances where this is going to work, only because you get an elderly person that, I mean, they don't go down their basement every day. They don't know if this thing's working, not working, don't know if the reader's working, and they get a non-compliance because they don't know. I get those calls every day, and we go out and we do investigate them as much as we can when we know about the situation. You're going to have some, and we've had to do, get creative to, remedy some situations. Some, like Debbie says, you just can't. You're bound by what it is. And we've played catch-up for a couple of years because the system seemed, the meters we have now are state-of-the-art. They're drive-bys. The readers, the remote reader meters, we don't even sell anymore. So they were gone, but we do have remote readers for people that have them damaged because you can't expect them to change the meter because we've gone to a new system. But eventually we're going to have a state-of-the-art system where Lori's just going to have to drive by, get the reading. She'll know immediately. So the response time is a lot better. And I can see it only getting better. And in 2 years, I mean, it's come a long, long way. We got a little bit farther to go. I think this is a good approach to some that do fall through. You're not going to prevent that until we get a better handle on how many we've got out there. The ones that are 35 years old that don't work anymore, now you got to ask somebody to come in and, it's $285, $345 to purchase a meter. A lot of people can't do that. I mean, they literally can't do that. So you try to work with every situation the best you can. So I think this is a great idea for what it's meant to be. It's not going to appease everybody, but the ones that we can see, the ones that have, like I said, you have to look at every situation. And the only way to do that is to get the facts, get the people that are out there doing it, the investigation report on the meter itself, get the feedback to maybe the committee, who it's going to be, and make a decision and go from there.
All right, thank you very much. Any other comments? Seeing none, can I have a motion?
Second.
Counselor Corradino.
No.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Reynolds.
Yes.
Counselor Walker. Yes. Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
And we need a resolution.
Need a resolution. I'm sure Attorney Caracoli will help us out on that one. I think that's the last item under this committee. Is there any other comments or issues you want to bring up? Seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Counselor Corradino.
Yes.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Reynolds.
Yes.
Counselor Walker. Yes. Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
This time I'd like to call the Physical Services Committee meeting to order. Can you please call the roll?
Counselor Van Buren.
Here.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes. We're
Counselor
here.
McLaughlin.
Here.
Counselor Gozick.
Here.
Need a motion to approve the minutes of the August 21st, 2017 committee meeting?
Make a motion.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Counselor Gozick.
Yes.
Are there any items to come under old business before this committee? Seeing none, moving on to new business. Item number 1, Mayor William Barlow received a request from Sarah Gozi, advocate/educator educator with the Oswego County Opportunity Services to aid families for permission to use city property along the west side of East First Street, south of the former Tim Hortons building. They received permission from the council to use this area for the past 2 years for a display in recognition of Domestic Violence Awareness Month in October. They asked to put the display on the lawn of City Hall or to have city officials select another grassy location or to keep the display on East First Street as in previous years. And here's the material. Go ahead.
Hi. So I'm actually Melissa Kennedy. Sarah couldn't be here. She had to cover an extra shift, so I apologize. So we're here just to propose 2 things: to light the exterior of City Hall purple for the entire month of October, which we did last year. It was really well received. It was done as part of New York State's Shine the Light campaign to literally and symbolically represent that the first step in ending domestic violence is to bring it out of darkness. we coordinated with the mayor's office last year, and like I said, it was very well received. We also were looking to, again, set up our silent witness survivor flag display. That should be about 550 small purple flags, along with red figurines. I believe we have an adult woman, a child, and a dog reserved for Oswego, for the city of Oswego. That comes with 2 yard signs that explain what the display is. The statues have little like shields on them that kind of tell you about the story that they're supposed to explain. And then we just need kind of input from you guys on the location, as long as that sounds like something that you are still in support of. So we have 3 suggestions on the lawn of City Hall to tie in with purple lights. I know we suggested that last year, and there were some questions about that. We ended up doing it on East First Street at the intersection, or we're certainly open to a different grassy public location if you have any suggestions.
Questions or comments from the councilors regarding location?
I have pictures too if anybody wants to see what everything looks like, examples.
Input on location, dealer's choice.
I mean, we
What
can
do? Don't say anything, I'm gonna pick.
Go ahead.
I'm fine with City Hall.
City Hall's the choice.
City Hall? All right.
Yes, I would agree.
Perfect. Thank you. And we appreciate your continued support.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
Make a motion.
Second.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Counselor Gozick.
Yes.
And we need a resolution.
Yeah, well, mayor's office.
We'll be
Rest
in
came
touch.
through him.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
Moving on to item number 2, the clerk's office has received a request from Nathan Beasley, chapter captain of Team Red, White, and Blue, for use of public space in order to host the second annual 9/11 Remembrance Run to be held on Sunday, September 17th, 2017. There's anyone here to speak to that? Making sure. I know they've done this in the past. Anyone have any questions or comments?
Make a motion.
Second.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Counselor Gozick.
Yes.
Moving on to item number 3, the clerk's office has received a request from Tanya Miller for permission to host a block party on Saturday, September 23rd, 2017, and there's an
Hi, my name is Tanya Miller. I live on West 4th Street. Our neighborhood would like to have a block party on Saturday, September 23rd. We had one last year. It was a lot more informal, just in my front yard. Councilor Reynolds will tell you I don't have much of a front yard. And as our community has gotten a lot closer together, we expect a fair amount more people this year. So we would like to block off West 4th Street between West Seneca and West Schuyler in order to accommodate the number of people that we expect to attend. And we're also hoping to have, some entertainment and games for the kids too.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
Make a motion.
Second.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Counselor Gozick.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Item number 4, Kevin Caracoli, City Attorney, requests consideration from the Common Council to approve seeking sealed bids for the sale of real property located at 249 West 7th Street, and there's a...
So here's one of these direct solicitation issues. We clearly own the property, the city of Oswego does. We have a neighboring property owner who is requesting to buy the property. I asked him what his intention was, and his intention is to raise the house and make parking for the occupants of another house he owns. I think it's an investment property, to be candid. And so I said, look, we have a policy. I can't entertain this. I'm going to bring it before the Common Council and let them decide what they want to do, if anything. So there you are. Happy to answer any questions. But I've given you everything that I was given. I did originally ask him to put it in writing and give me an offer and describe what your intentions were. I think he told me that over the phone after I received the letter, but everything is, I believe, in your packet or as described. So happy to answer questions or entertain any, but that's just doing my job here.
Questions or comments? Nelson?
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is in my ward, and actually right around the corner from my house, the mayor's house, Alan Lindsay, I believe he's here today. We haven't met personally, we've spoken, but again, this goes back to some of the issues we were talking about tonight. I apologize, I'm losing my voice, so I'm trying not to talk too much. My first day of school tomorrow, it's going to be tough if I can't talk. I just wanted, Mr. Lindsay's here, and I don't know if he would like to speak, but he told me he'd be here tonight and talk to him before the meeting.
I don't have any further comments. Basically, I want to remove the house and off-street parking. Clear up area. I'm trying to clear up the intersections of Erie and West Side.
My turn? Counselor, we live in the same neighborhood. The only thing I'll say is I really don't generally disagree to leveling homes to put in parking lots in neighborhoods. I think this house is a good candidate for the land bank to do a rehab. So I don't know if I would sell it off. I will admit that I believe the house we're talking about is 81 Erie, which is a constant problem in the neighborhood with parking and partying, and I think I call the cops on that house on a regular basis. As much as I would like to see those cars go somewhere else, I don't think leveling homes in neighborhoods general, but especially this neighborhood, is the best approach. So I would be against this sale.
I agree with the mayor on this one. I think there's a good amount of momentum in the city right now for demolishing houses, but the tough part is when you demolish a lot of homes, the neighborhoods start to kind of look like smiles missing teeth. You got to be careful what you put in there because a blacktop, paved parking lot might look as bad or be as detrimental to the area as the house that was there. So I'd love to see the land bank utilize some of their other potentials and actually rehabbing the homes. They're doing one around the corner from my house right now that's turned out to be a really nice place that's been an eyesore for a long time. So I'd love to see the land bank kind of live up to that potential where they're rehabbing houses and kind of coming with plans together to actually sell the homes and market them and stuff. So I would love to see this one make it to that stage. Any other questions or comments, though?
How long would that process take? I've talked to Mr. aware of that.
It depends on how the land bank does. They're moving along pretty quickly, and we can certainly recommend more homes. They have a deliberation process that they have to meet for what they do. They have a committee that meets to talk about if they demolish, if they renovate, how they handle that, putting out for bids. The one on mine was put out for bids, and a local developer purchased it and he's rehabbing it now. That one turned around pretty quickly, but I can't say that's going to happen for all of them. That's kind of the best case scenario. Is they really followed the guidelines of porch, all that good stuff. They were very agreeable to what we wanted done. Put a fair amount of money in the house. I can't say every developer is going to do the same and kind of drop a boatload of money into something that's, the case. So that one's kind of worked out awesome, but I can't see that. Can't guarantee the same result. But in this case, I think, and this is kind of the crux of it. It's coming before us right now. You put it out for bids. You can certainly put it out for bids. You can tie your hands and try to honor a bid. If it comes in, doing this process, we can discuss them, but I think it kind of looks disingenuous if you're willing to take them and then just say, we don't know. You're really going to say no proposal, but that's, I think we've weighed in as far as we want. If anyone else has any comments or concerns about the process or the plans, I'd love to hear them, especially if you're not on the committee. Councilor Bernino.
Counselor, I agree with you that, I think as a last resort, we should be tearing houses down. I mean, I like the comment about the smile and the missing teeth. That was a good one. But in the bigger picture, I mean, we're losing tax base as well. And we have had some success in knocking houses down. I know in your ward, there was a how-many-year battle to get that property resolved.
Decades.
But again, it took years to do, and I certainly don't want this council or this administration to get in the habit of saying, oh, it's a problem house, let's knock it down. And that, to me, is almost like at the end of the process. And I like your idea about the land bank. I know that house you're talking about around the corner from your house. I mean, the siding, they put a new roof, siding, I mean, it looks so much better. And it's all we needed was a developer to come in and buy it from the land bank and develop it. And I'd rather see that happen to houses than knock it down, especially a house that has good bones. I believe this house does.
Yeah, I'd like to at least see the option explored, before our first choice is, demolished. Especially now that, and this conversation is only happening now because we have those avenues available to us. A couple of years ago, it would have been fantastic. Somebody wants to rip it out, let's do it. But now that we actually have choices and multiple municipalities looking at other options and actively taking an approach to revitalizing neighborhoods, it's a different conversation now. So that would just be my 2 cents. Any other questions or comments? Take a motion. Anybody wants to make one?
Second.
Counselor Van Buren.
No.
Counselor Emmons.
No.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Counselor Gozick.
Yes.
Motion fails for lack of a majority.
Moving on to item number 6, Thomas Kells, DPW Commissioner, received a request from Kathleen Rushmore for use and waiver of usage fee for the pavilion at Brightback Park on September 7th, 2017, from 5 to 8 p.m. for yoga in the park and evening of relaxation. This event is a donation-only event with all proceeds to benefit the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention Out of the Darkness walk team. And there's an attachment. Anyone here to speak to that? Oh, I skipped over. I'll go back to it. My bad. Anyway, we'll just do this one now. Any questions or comments on this one? They're asking. The biggest part of it is that they're asking for a fee waiver. Anybody opposed? Questions or comments?
From what I read in the letter, they're really asking for the use of the pavilion only in the event of rain.
Right.
So, they may not even need it. It's just like a backup plan.
Yeah. I'm they were going to reserve it.
So it seems like it's really a non-issue, almost.
For me. All right, take a motion.
Make a motion.
Second.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Counselor Gozick.
Yes. Yes.
Back up to number 5. Thomas Kells, DPW Commissioner, received a request from Diane Zitch for use of public space during a wedding ceremony on September 22nd, 2017 at 6:15 p.m. in the northeast area of Brightback Park near the steps to the marina. Ms. Zitch is looking for permission to place a 10-by-10 tent and 50 chairs, both provided by Rental Warehouse. Any questions or comments on that one? Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
Make a motion.
Second.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Counselor Gozick.
Yes.
Item number 7, the Engineer's Office received a request for use of public space submitted by the West Side Properties FRSW LLC, owner of property located at 130 East 2nd Street, located in the 4th Ward, for use of public space for 4 foot by 15 foot to install a new ADA handicap ramp between the sidewalk and property line fronting East Oneida Street. Council.
I have no problem with that, but I do have a question for the council. I know that we was around property. They put that in there, versus rules or something, and we remove it, we have it removed. So it don't just sit there and look dormant after a while, and no one maintains it.
I think you can do that if you condition your approval like that. Otherwise, any grant or easement tends to run with the land and can be assigned or carry over to future owners. But if you limit it, if you're specific in your conditions of approval, sure. And it's it's a handicap ramp. It appears that it could be removed without, you know, a whole lot of damage. So as long as you condition your approval that it's specific to this particular owner or period of time or whatever the condition might be, you'd be justified in removing it at a later date.
I'm just thinking out loud, that, you know, some of the houses down there, and if they don't, maintain it after this person moves on, move it out, or the guy you want to go with, maybe get a home. Well, again,
Those are conditions that you're granting the use of public space. Your authority allows you to revoke that right, and you don't generally need a reason to revoke it, but you know, I would caution you to have a reason to revoke a use of public space like that. But you clearly have the authority to grant and to revoke.
Gentleman in the back.
Hello, my name is Joshua. I'm with Harmony Architectural, representing Westside Podiatry for this property. It's currently an office building, and it has no means of egress out for no ramp. It's about 20 inches to grade everywhere. So, being a podiatrist office, we kind of need the ramp to get everybody inside and outside. We're looking at about only about a foot that's going to be over the property line. The ramp's about 15 feet, plus or minus, plus there's a sidewalk we're going to have to connect to the municipal sidewalk off to the north side. So it's really only, it's going to be a wood frame ramp as well, so it could be removed if needed. But I assume that being a business, they're going to need accessible means to get out of the building for future. This is the office building. It's the old Von Schoeneck & King.
Oh, okay, I thought it was a house.
Yeah, it's not a house. That's what I was questioning. Yeah, it's a business. So.
Okay then.
I mean, I was just going to say, either way, even if you wanted to put some sort of reverter clause
Right.
in there, it's really just a waiting game. They'd either have to report, or you'd have to catch them that they're not using it for what it's needed for. And even if you did, you might as well just leave it, because then you could just revoke it for the reasons that you don't need it anymore. So I don't really see any amendments. And this is really kind of a prove it or don't situation. Any other questions or comments?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Counselor Gozick.
Yes.
Any other items to come before this committee? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Counselor Van Buren.
Yes.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Counselor McLaughlin. Counselor Gozick.
Yes.
This time, I'd like to call the Planning and Development Committee meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Counselor Emmons.
Here.
Counselor Gozick.
Here.
Counselor Corradino.
Here.
Need a motion to approve the minutes for the July 17, 2017 committee meeting?
Make a motion?
Second.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Counselor Gozick.
Yes.
Counselor Corradino.
Yes.
Any items that need to come under old business? Seeing none. New business under discussion. Councilor Eric Van Buren requests discussion regarding winter parking. Councilor?
Thank you. A number of you guys reached out to me to discuss winter parking and the plans that we have for it moving forward. My stance is pretty well documented on where I would like to see it go, so I'd like to turn it over to the councilors that have suggestions for changes to the current system. I don't know them, through the chair, of course, or whoever would like to start discussing those items.
Councilor Reynolds.
I will go. I was pointed at, so I figured I should be next. My stance has not changed from last year either. I would ultimately like to see the 24/7 alternate parking as well. But I would like to at least see an option for the 0+2, 1+1 that we did discuss at some point last year and ended up moving to a 0+1 parking situation. And hearing what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, I was just, once again, I'm going to be short-winded, but I seen Councilor Cordino had mentioned this as well when I looked at the paper tonight, and seen his emails as well, but I can support that. I can't go all the way to alternate, at least in my ward. I don't think constituents would support it, but just looking at it, there was only a handful in the 5th ward and only a couple permits given out. But realistically, I think that expanding it to, if you have a driveway, you can get one spot, so you have two. Caitlin made a good point. People have 2 cars these days, and by and large, considering the number of permits that were issued last year, I don't think it's unreasonable. Again, I do favor, I'm not in favor of the alternate, but I would be willing to go as far as to say it should be expanded so that if you have no parking, maybe you give it a family, but that's exceptional. But I knew there were a couple of people that got protected that could have used it, and we had to go out of our way to try to find somewhere to park. I would be in favor of that.
Councilor Cordy.
Thank you. Thank you for being short-winded. I don't think there's really a good answer for this. This is, for as long as I've lived in Oswego, this has always been an issue. I mean, it wasn't an issue years ago because the ban was the ban, and somehow everybody found a place to park. But again, this is not 1957, it's 2017, and there's a heck of a lot of more cars in each family. And I'm primarily interested in focused on that first ward, Councilor Reynolds' ward. There's houses that are 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 square feet that were built 150 years ago or more that have no driveway. And I'm concerned the ORA is doing a wonderful job of invigorating our neighborhoods and helping people to have pride in their neighborhood and paint their house and do all kinds of work. And I think this is a small gesture on the part of the city to try to accommodate another small percentage of people. I do have the figures that the DPW gave me at the end of last year. 65 people applied for the on-street parking, and about 21 of them were approved. And primarily, it's in red on this chart, the majority of them were denied because they already had a parking space. So I think the simplest way and the most effective way is to do what Councilor Reynolds said, is to go to, what did you call it, 1+1?
So if you have one I'm sorry, through the chair. If you have one parking spot, you would be eligible for one additional parking spot, assuming we'd take the same system that we did last year, adding a parking spot. And if you have 0 parking spots, you would be eligible for 2 parking spots. And that would eliminate, we wouldn't have the rental. I know one of the big issues was the rental properties and having them have 4 or 5 parking spots. And that would eliminate any of that, because if they already have parking for 2 cars, they wouldn't be eligible for any. And if the max they could ever have would be 2, if they didn't have any parking.
And that's essentially what I'm supporting here. I mean, again, if we're adding another, if everything was the same as last year and the same 65 people applied, there would be an additional 44 additional cars on the road. And I'm not sure, I'm sure the commissioner could probably tell me how many miles of highway there are in the city, but an additional 44 cars hopefully wouldn't be too much of a burden on the DPW, because we certainly want to make sure that the roads are safe and clean and able to be driven. But I'm just thinking that we should try to do something to tweak the system. So, but I'm more than willing to listen to any other ideas. But this is where I'm at this point.
Comments from Councilor Weber.
So I'm certainly in favor of an expansion. Obviously, anything that moves closer to doing something that I would prefer, I would certainly go with that. I do think, just a few comments to Councilor Cordino's point, I think a large number of people didn't bother applying for it knowing that they didn't meet the criteria. So I think doing this, you should hopefully, and obviously I could be wrong, but you should see an expansion of people applying, so the numbers would be off from that. I believe it'd be more than just 44 that would come in. And I still think that the best way to control density and the flow of traffic is the alternate street parking. I think this option still leaves a lot of loopholes where people are going to try and apply for front yard parking and that type of thing. And I noticed in my ward, there's an increase in requests for front yard parking. I was pretty limited on the ones that I approved. Mainly it was really just on the one-way, not one-way, it should be, one-way streets between 2nd Street and Syracuse Ave, and one spot on 10th.
Can't understand what you're saying. You're talking.
Sure. So basically, I disagree with some of the points that were made. My main bullet point was that I think you're going to see a higher number of people apply now that the criteria is expanded. So I don't know if those numbers that were originally reported are really true numbers. I think it's tough to make justification based on those numbers. For example, if you had a free health clinic and you're only taking the most dire patients, then you're not going to see, a large window of people. You're going to say, oh, only 10 people used it because they only took people that were practically dying. So in this case, the same situation occurred. You're not taking everybody. You're taking the most dire situations. So I think once you expand it, you're going to see more people do it. I also have an issue, and I think the tough part that you're not addressing is that you're still allowing front yard parking to happen for free and charging for a permit on the street when you could alleviate those issues twofold with alternate street parking because you wouldn't be doing as much signage or have as much work that needs to have an offset cost to it because you'd be readdressing the city as a whole and controlling density of cars and the flow of traffic because you're changing up the streets as a whole, for a longer period of time. So, not to belabor my point, which I've stated several times, I'm certainly in favor of expanding the current criteria so that it meets a better area of people.
Yes, Council.
I agree with Councilor Van Buren on just about all of his points, as I've expressed before. But on the first one about the numbers, I know that I myself told several people they're eligible, so don't apply. So that those numbers would be skewed because when they called me to see, so what ended up happening, I didn't even send them to the DPW. So I know that those numbers would be skewed.
Comments from the public? Anybody? Yes.
I really like the idea of having 24/7 alternate parking in the areas that need it, like getting towards. Apply it there because it applies to so many people. I like the 1+1 because that makes really good sense. And I would think that signs all over the city looks that great. Look right around the city. See how many signs are popped up on the lots. I don't think it's attractive. And I don't see why we should press rules on people who don't need that.
Yes, in the back. Yep, come right out.
I just want to give my perspective on this. I also agree with the alternate street parking, but only in the wintertime from December through March. I live in the 7th Ward, and the street I live in is quite wide. We have 2 parking spots. My husband and I both have a car. But on the occasions when our children come home from out of state to visit in the winter, as in Christmas, there's no place for them to put their cars, so we have to end up parking on the grass. In looking in over the last 2 winters, we had an extreme winter where we had a lot of snow, and we had a mild winter last year where we had not very much snow. And because of the mandate of getting everybody's cars off the street last year, there were many nights where, because it didn't snow at all that day or it had snowed lightly and the plows finished plowing during the daytime, there was no plowing done at night whatsoever. And that was the original premise of getting everybody's car off the streets at night so that the DPW could plow during the night. But there were very many nights, at least half the weeks and most weeks, where there was no plowing because it was not necessary. But yet we were mandated to get the cars off the street or risk getting ticketed and towed. So I think need to look at the whole picture again, what's best for everybody, and no matter what kind of winter we have, whether it's a hard winter with a lot of snow or a mild winter with not much snow, and the hardships you're imposing on people by saying you've got to get the cars off the road every single night. So I agree with the alternate street parking for the winter months.
I will make a comment before I turn it over to another speaker. You know, was somewhat of the lightning rod of the discussion last year in terms of winter parking. So I've done some homework on this and continue to do homework on this in terms of policies. I think it's widely known there are communities that have 24/7 alternate street parking. There are communities that have moved from bans, complete bans overnight, to alternate street parking. My issue with moving to alternate street parking in terms of going, if we decided tonight, for example, to eliminate the ban and go into alternate street parking, we don't have the pieces of the puzzle in place to do that move. Other communities that have gone through that process have done parking studies, have invoked technology, have empowered the mayor to make emergency declarations. They put pieces of the puzzle in place to allow for emergency snow bans and communications to take place and all those sorts of things, and to get information out quickly. So, and I think we have some complexities within the city in terms of streets that we need to work on in order, before we move to a complete sort of 24/7 process. And so I think I understand what folks say in terms of let's move to that, but if we're going to move to that, we have to put those pieces of the puzzle in place, and we can't do that in September. We just can't. This conversation, if we're going to have this conversation about winter parking, beyond maybe a couple of tweaks, which I'll talk about that in a moment, we have to have this conversation in February, March, April, not in September, because there are pieces that we need to put in place. We should be asking our traffic committee, implement a parking study, go out and study our city streets, figure out if we went to alternate street parking, are there city streets that need to be changed to a one-way? Are there streets that we simply can't have alternate street parking on because they're just too narrow? We don't have that information. And oh, by the way, if we're going to do this, let's give the technology that's needed for the mayor to be able to send out text messages to everybody that says, as of 11 o'clock tonight, no parking on the city streets because it's a blizzard moving in or whatever else. The communities that have moved in that direction from a total ban to alternate street parking have done their homework and have gone through those processes. And until the council decides to do that, I don't think we can move to that place quite yet. Secondly, the other thing I will say is that we can't keep changing the policy. It's just darn confusing for folks if we can come back year after year and change the policy, whatever it is. If you look around the city right now, all the signs that say parking's banned on the city streets, that's what our signage says. So if somebody comes into town, that's what they're seeing. We just can't keep amending our policy every single year because I just think it gets more and more cumbersome and complicated for people. What do I do now? Do I have to pay? Do I not have to pay? I have one car. Do I have two cars? The DPW commissioner now, if we move on this, has to go out and figure out, well, do they have enough space for one parking spot? Is there two here? Let me get out my measuring tape, because now we have another layer that we need to implement and saying, do they fall within the criteria of having a one-car parking space, a two-car parking space? Now we got to put another space in the street, because that's our policy that we've put into place, that they actually have a particular spot on the street in which they can park overnight, and now he has to identify two spots instead of one spot. Again, if we want to move in that direction, I think that's what we need to decide on tonight in terms of tweaking. But we have to have these conversations start earlier, and we have to move to a consistent policy moving forward. And if the end goal is, by the city, to have 24/7 alternate street parking, then start that conversation and put the resources in place to actually have somebody come back and say, yep, we can do this. These are the resources you need to do this, and here are the streets in which you might not be able to do that on. And then the council will at least have a full understanding of the process, and complications, and all those sorts of things to make an actual intelligent, informed policy. Yes, ma'am.
I am not being disrespectful, but this is one of the first boards that over your request. If any of you would like to come down to
have green space, and nobody likes to use the green space anymore. That's what used to be that. Go back to letting them use green space and make them a requirement to have it fixed before a certain time in the spring, before letting them park on the street. And part of the zoning, the purpose of our zoning, look in the very first section of zoning, what's the purpose of it? Prevent undue crowding in the neighborhood. It hasn't worked out very well, first or third well, especially when she goes. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I rent, I'm considering buying where I live right now. I rent, and I understand my landlord has to have a parking spot for me, and if for some reason I had more than 2 cars in my driveway, I would have to figure that out. So I'm not a homeowner sitting there complaining, and my driveway's narrow, and thank God my vehicle's small, and I have enough room to open my door and squeeze out, especially in winter. But, again, you can't run a house or college kids, and you're 4 years old, and have 2 parking spots. Well, supposedly you're supposed to have. I was under the impression that rental property was required to have 2 parking spots, so everyone was using next door to me as a rental property. Brand new rental property, got a rental permit, it's 1 parking spot, and I noticed before landlord came to the city and said, you can't have 2 cars, you need to take out my tax place of the street. So, how did that happen? How did they get a rental permit? They're 4 bedrooms. That's 3 houses, 1 car right now, but because it's a rental, they can have 2 cars.
Thank you. I mean, and I think that's part of the complexity of this conversation in terms of moving. You know, I'm not necessarily saying I'm against the 24/7 policy eventually, but again, I think we have to go through the process in order to get there, and I think it's a multi-step, multi-piece. There's a zoning piece, absolutely. I argued that last year in terms of rental properties and so on and so forth. There's a zoning piece attached to that. There's many layers to kind of get us to that place to ultimately kind of figure this out. I don't think we have done, you know, those that truly advocate 24/7, I don't think we've done that homework to kind of get to us to a place of putting that into law. I mean, I think it's up to the committee and the council to ultimately figure out if they want to do some tweaking and stuff of it, but I would not be in favor of 24/7 tonight, just because, again, I don't think we have the pieces of the puzzle in place to kind of move that in September. We're in September, and to put that into place. Yes, Councilman.
Yes, I personally think we should stay right the same way it is, because after the fact, listen to it. Council in here and council else says, now you're going to open it up. You have 1 plus 1. You have 1 plus 4 people, whatever you have. There's going to be 164 people. I don't agree with that.
Yes, Councilor.
So just to my comments, you know, I certainly don't think that, you know, if I could get the council to support 24/7 alternate street parking, it certainly wouldn't be for this winter season. I treat it the same as the zoning code, which I advocated for the rewrite of the zoning code, fully understanding that that was a multi-month, multi-committee, multi-engagement process. And that would be the same place. So I would be happy to get the council to agree to 24/7 alternate street parking for the following season, if that was a step the council was willing to take into consideration tonight, knowing that it involves streets that now will become potentially one-way. Streets will have parking on only one side of the street because of the density issues, knowing that it involves mapping from traffic and DPW, as well as the traffic advisory committee playing a large role in honoring the system of schedules and those type of things. So, you know, well understanding that those are the processes that need to take place. I would love to see that commitment move forward, you know, from tonight's discussion, knowing that we're going to craft a resolution that we're looking to form the department heads to make, plans and preparations for that to be the case, for the winter of 2019, if that was the case. But I say that knowing that doing something like that is an investment. It costs money. It's like the water meters that you were talking about before. The municipalities that provide them made the investment knowing that they make more money. Handing out the water meters, knowing that the product works, taking responsibility for the product, and you're going to collect the true value of what they're doing for the water, and the benefits of saving money on the back end because they know when they're using it better for chemicals, when there's leaks. They invest in leak detection software. All of those things are fine, things that we talked about before, but they're an investment. They require time. They require money. They require the commitment to do it properly. So I will absolutely advocate for 24/7 off the street, fully understanding that it's an investment of time and money, and it's not something that we just say, okay, in this season it takes place. So when the conversation comes up, I'm still going to advocate. And if that's the case, and that's what we're looking for, I would certainly recommend advocating for that and proposing it for the winter season of 2019, that the council spends the next years researching that and making that the policy, knowing the challenges that presents as the entire right half of the room won't be here. So that would be the case. So I say that.
Put it in that perspective.
So feel free, I'll come back on that side and be as belligerent as I like until you tell me to stop. But, that would be my recommendation, because you've got people that are out there looking for this, and you don't want to keep waffling on policy. You want to give them a direction. So I think if people here are of the understanding that 24/7 would work or potentially work, then that's what we should work towards and set that into place now, knowing that it'll happen. I'm certainly for an expansion because it gets the people that need it, my ward included, the parking that they need or require. That would be my stance. So if that's the case, that's certainly what I'm advocating for. I would be happy to put a resolution for that together if there's support. But, that's the discussion I'm having. So I certainly support Councilor Reynolds' expansion right now, understanding, as I stated before, that it's going to increase those numbers and further the strain under the current policy. So knowing that's the case and thinking that actually makes it more of a case to commit to a 24/7 plan coming in the future.
Councilor Cordino.
I'd be interested in hearing from the only person on the council who's driven a plow in the city of Oswego, his take. He's awful quiet over there, and I'd be interested in finding out what it's like to drive a 10-wheeler through the city of Oswego and what you think about all this. Councilor McLaughlin?
Other comments, thoughts? Yeah, I guess I would say I would be interested in the study. And I don't think the council will ever solve this issue until it invests the resources into, as Councilor what Councilor Van Buren is suggesting. I'm not sure if the end result, I don't know if we should be so bold to say the goal for next year, if you will, or to put in writing that we're going to have 24/7 alternate street parking. But I would be supportive of the council voting on a resolution to invest the manpower, the money, the authority for that fundamental review to take place and for that work to be done next year, knowing that it's going to fall on the two of you and a new 5. But You know, without that information, without that full study, without engagement within that conversation, we're just never going to be able to put this conversation to bed. I think as things grow, as things happen, the council is going to have to deal with this time and time again, and it needs to be armed with that information, again, to make a knowledgeable decision. And if that decision next year, if it comes in July, and here's the thoughts, and here's the streets that can happen in, it can't happen in, and we've talked to everybody, and council, you need to buy a smaller plow for some of the streets, and whatever the case may be, well, at least you know it all. At least you have the information, and then you can make a sound decision from that place. So I don't know if that is supporting what you're saying or not. I think it is in some respect, but I think that's what needs to kind of happen in order for this council to be able to make that decision. Councilor Goes.
Again, I've been doing a lot of listening tonight, but I think after hearing what Councilor McLaughlin had to say, I'd like saying earlier, I would be in favor of expansion, but we didn't consider the numbers. I could get behind the resolution and say we look at putting a study together and realistically get a look at how much it's going to cost. But I think if there is the will on the council to proceed, I think, as the mayor said, we're just adding chaos to an already chaotic situation in the paper. I read his quote, and it would seem to me like the best thing we would be looking at a study before we do anything to really reflect on the situation. Get the information, throw this on Commissioner Cowles here when they had the system down, in the last minute. Like I said, to be honest with you, I just feel the residents of my ward, I represent them. Yes, there's a citywide issue. I also have to look out for their concerns. And I didn't talk to Nanny, but only a few people in my ward even applied for it. But I think we get what's best for the whole city. I can also, look at this. I don't think that, here Councilor McLaughlin said it's important, but I think that if we did it right, if it came to that alternate system, the 24/7 alternate, it could work if it was implemented right. Obviously, everyone agrees the way it was implemented before was a half measure. It was a fiasco. It was a debacle. It was terrible. People are still complaining about it. That's why I have reservations about going any further than just expanding. I can support the resolution to put a study together, to perhaps leave this issue to rest.
Other comments? Suggestions? Do I have, Councilor Van Buren, are you going to work on a
I
2019?
can certainly put together a proposal for the council meeting coming up. Read that. I would, Councilor Reynolds, do you plan on submitting a resolution to expand the current system? Like I said, I'd certainly be in favor of that for the current year. If that's something you still want to move forward with, there's no. I would still personally support that.
So it sounds like we have two resolutions that will be coming from
I was
this.
gonna say, so you'll have two. I proposed, given the circumstances, mine would probably be a waiver, just with the understanding that it has been discussed here tonight. And Councilor Reynolds, I believe, would be the same, unless you've got one here. Yours would be under, So either way, it's been discussed, so resolution's coming out of it, certainly. So when it's on the agenda, I'm fine with either.
The other question I have for the councilors in general, are there thinking about the proposal for this year, are there target zones that we should be looking at applying neighborhood policies? Are there places within the city that we, as counselors, can, or would be interested in identifying and saying, you know what, this is not for the whole city, but for certain places, or just trying to figure out whether that makes that easier or more cumbersome to have target zones where that might apply for this year.
And I didn't nail on the nose. I think we're going to end up maybe totally 24/7, but we're going to have some sort of framework for 24/7 in certain areas where it's wide enough.
Yeah, well, and I guess I'm even getting to, there may be areas within the city that if a new add-on was proposed, that we still wouldn't be able, even though the homeowner might have a reason to have, you know, they have a one-car parking spot, but they want to have one car off, given a new proposal, it still might not be in the best interest of that particular street or that particular block even, because of the width of the street per se, or where would that car eventually go because of the density of that particular block in terms of the houses. You know, again, there's just some, I always think there's complexities when we talk about these things, without opening up a kind of a Pandora's box to, well, everybody that has a one-space driveway now is really eligible, and there's really no sort of recourse to say no to that particular person based upon the conditions of that particular block. Yes, I'll kind of go down the line.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, just getting to your point, I think it's tough to do, you know, segmented areas that are allowed to do it, because I can think of off the bat, you know, Mr. Clark's neighborhood in the 4th Ward, there's a couple people there, specifically right across from St. Paul's School, that don't have a lot of driveway spaces. That block is continually advocated for that, so it's tough to, you know. Yeah, and it's over here, they have space for parking, and they certainly want the extra permits. He didn't meet the criteria last time. He actually ended up parking in a friend's house in my ward, which was a number of blocks away from him. There's 3 houses on my block, which 7th Street is certainly wide enough that all have one-car driveways that, you know, if we did something where just the 1st ward, just the 3rd ward, you know, the areas that we would consider extremely dense, you know, and allow them to have permits, it you know, excludes the areas that may have met the criteria if we expanded it, but don't. But, you know, I see that's the tough part when you don't do something that continuity-wise affects the whole, you know, and you try and just target zones, you're going to find yourself expanding regularly for every block that applies and makes a solid case.
And point out that if I remember correctly, that's one of the reasons why we put those signs and designated parking spots in last year, so that maybe like a house on your street, just to use you for an example, they might not even get a parking spot on their street, but maybe around the corner if it's not feasible. So for this year, I would think if we were going to do a target zone, we'd have to be pretty, I don't know, that seems, I feel like we would have to have almost a study to see where the target zone should be instead of just place it, you know. You know what I'm trying to say?
If we choose them like off-street parking, then now, or the on-street parking, then now, the sign, or the commission else, is that designated area is safe.
Yeah.
For vehicles and vehicles.
I think the challenge is, and I think we've kind of spoken to this a little bit, is that there's just the X factor of the unknown number of cars that might come onto the street. So whereas last year, it might have been fairly easy to park 17 cars on the street. That's the spot, there it is, it's right here, that's okay. Now we have 107 cars parked on the street, and now that one street that had one car now has 15 cars that wants to park on that street. I mean, those are and obviously we'll kind of look at the final version of the resolution and take a look at it, but those are the things I think we have to contemplate in terms of how we're applying what we currently have written, and if we're adding on little bits and pieces, there is a complication now. Our commissioners have to go through and work through and try to figure out, and getting out his measuring tape, and is there enough for 2 cars here, or whatever. I don't know what he has to do, but I think we just need to kind of consider all those factors as we kind of move this forward. Other thoughts, comments, suggestions? Sounds like we have 2 resolutions that will come before the council. Yes.
So that I see them be required to use green space if they have available to them before parking the. Why was that? Why was that?
Yeah, just through the chair.
Yeah, you can.
It's still an option. It's at the discretion of the counselor. Right, and that's an option for the
They have it
council.
available.
So any counselor can approve that when it comes with us from a form with from the police department, and they have to draw a little map of what their yard looks like and where their car would go, and then we issue a permit that lasts, I believe, for 2 years if you want to let them do it. So it's an option that's available to all the counselors. Several of us decided to move away from that, self included. It's still an option available to other people, but again, that kind of brings up the point that charging them to park on the street, not charging them to park on their lawn, that's done for free. It requires essentially the same number of to monitor, make sure that in the form itself, you're required to restore the grass and green space to the way it was before. We take no deposit, we take no money. There's no incentive to do that, and if it's the case, you're going to get your same calls. I put them in for the developments every year when the plow scrapes up the edge and you have to reseed and repair and resod. So the money's going out either way. Just a point.
Yeah, and the other 2 points I would make. I mean, I think these are not necessarily connected to winter parking, but connected to winter. I mean, I think as a council we need to address at some point plowing of sidewalks is atrocious, at least in the 3rd Ward. It's absolutely atrocious in terms of not doing that. And secondly, I would encourage the councilors, if we in fact move forward with a study, I know to me it's an issue in the 3rd Ward, might be an issue in the 1st Ward as well, but especially in the wintertime, we have what I call perpendicular parking in these parking pads. I think I've talked to the council a little bit about this, where you have a parking pad and cars are parked perpendicular into that to jam as many parking spots as possible. During the winter, you can't even walk on the sidewalks because of the cars and the snowbanks that are attached, and for the plows, they're halfway onto the street, which I would assume makes it even more challenging for the plows to get through and be able to cut these banks. So it's hard enough in the summer to get around these places. I have a rental property right around the corner from my house that has 5 cars and what really should be a 2-car parallel parking spot, and they jam themselves in, and you can't even barely go around them even in the summertime. So there's other issues that I think that we need to address eventually when it comes to kind of wintertime. As we go. Given that, any other things that need to come before this committee tonight? If not, I will take a motion to adjourn. Motion.
Second.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Counselor Gozick. Counselor Corradino.
Yes.